Hey dudes, it's Larold, and it is day 2 of Dawn of the Hunt League, and it is a league. It's officially the best PoE 2 patch ever, and the worst. You know, it's the first. It was gonna be both. I'm just gonna jump right in. So, a lot of people are very upset about the state of the league. I would say generally for me, I had a very, very rough start as a Huntress, a spear Huntress, and I think really that boils down to two things. I think the way that you want to build spears basically lends toward like a warrior playstyle rather than a Huntress playstyle, and I think the way you want to build a Huntress really takes you away from wanting to use spears. I think they're just like really not very compatible with each other. But just like to kind of focus more on the league to start off here, basically I'm going to hit on two things, right? I'm going to hit on the league and then my specific character. So I would say that my experience was maybe not as negative as the most vocal people, but it was obviously up and down. I had quite a lot of technical issues in the first few hours of the league. I did try to engage with the league mechanic, the new wisps that were added, and I didn't get anything of value from the first one I killed in the Grillwood. That's fine. It's it's the first area, right? The second one that I encountered in the Red Veil crashed me out of the game, and then I basically wasn't able to play for like 2 hours. So that was not a great experience with the wisps. So at that point, I ignored them until about Act 3, where I was just doing like negative damage to enemies, and so I was just desperate for anything to get gear. So I started killing basically every single wisp monster I could, very slowly, of course. And the thing is, I killed probably from Act 3 all the way through Act 6, probably like 15 to 20 wisp monsters. And the most valuable thing I ever got from a wisp was a Regal Shard. So I feel very like negatively about the wisps mechanically, at least throughout the campaign. They add a lot of time to killing the rares, and they don't seem to give any reward at all. So it's, PoE 1 is very much a game that's built around balancing risk and reward. PoE 2 is a game about risk, and that's kind of frustrating. And I think that really is ultimately the thing that I has definitely was like trouble for me in the run through the campaign, at least the first half of the campaign, because once I hit about level 45, things suddenly smoothed out like quite a lot, and there was a patch overnight to reduce monster health for like non-bosses by anywhere from like 0% to 25% less health. For a large chunk of that, it is just straight up 25% less health, but it kind of tapers down slowly from like level, I think it's like level 8 or something, and then it tapers kind of back up as you're ending the campaign. And I would say, just generally speaking, that helped, but really I just felt like the build basically didn't come online until about level 45, which is really brutal to mostly be like auto-attacking 5, 6, 8 hours into the campaign. Like, I'm actually not sure how long I've played. I raid on weekends, right? So like I didn't really lock in that hard for either night of the campaign, and I spent a lot of time playing around with different skills and so on, but I'm just gonna find out. I'm guessing that I haven't looked at my deaths or played. I'm guessing that my deaths are like around 75 and my played time is probably like 22, 24 hours. That's less than I thought, but still not great. Let's check the deaths. Oh my god, 72. Nice. I swear I didn't. I'll scroll up. Swear I didn't look beforehand. All right, cool. So obviously that's insanely brutal for the campaign. And, I think the thing that really is like the most upsetting about this is I knew before the league came out, I knew that Deadeye was going to be really good and crossbows were going to be really good, and crossbow Deadeye was going to be truly amazing, but they really hyped up the ability to play both melee and ranged as a spear-using Huntress, and it seemed great, and I do think the Huntress Ascendancy is awesome. But spears just are like completely a melee weapon, and I would say this felt very much like playing the Monk. It's more mobile, and I like a lot of aspects of it, but I just felt like at the worst case situation, I felt like I was working so much harder than I did even on the Monk, and certainly on any ranged character, to do less damage. And I think that's what frustrated me in the first half of the campaign. I think that's what drove so many people so crazy, is that the damage is just no good for the first depending on your experience, 10 hours of the campaign, 5, 2, whatever, but the damage is just terrible early on, and I think the reason for that, because I have seen some people say that they've had a positive experience, really just boils down to, like, the gear being terrible, there just being no currency dropping in the first half of the campaign. I did count the amount of raw exalt drops that I got throughout the campaign, and it was 6. I got 5 raw regal orbs through the campaign, and like I feel like taking away the crafting bench, taking away the ability to fix a weapon like this one that I have here, right? It at least has a % physical damage roll on it that's pretty good. But like the reason that I'm showing off blight-edged winged spear here is I got this in the Maudun Quarry, if I remember correctly, like very start of Act 2, right? Level 16 weapon. I used this all the way up until I killed Doriani. Or until I fought Doriani. I tried to kill Doriani with this weapon because I could not, for the life of me, find a better weapon through like killing as many rares as I could, or just going to the vendor over and over and over again throughout the campaign. Couldn't find a better weapon. I wiped on Doriani several times. I had one wipe where I was so brutally close, and ultimately I just I think that just broke me. Like I was very depressed at that point, and so I just went and ground out another level. I went back and ultimately bought a different spear, not this spear. This one I got later on. I think it's a random drop or something. The state of gear is definitely very frustrating, and it's very frustrating to do no damage, right? Like there does have to be a character journey. I get that in any sort of RPG, but especially in ARPG, it wouldn't be very fun if I were just instantly deleting everything all the time either. Like I don't want to play cookie clicker. But to be like auto attacking a boss like 400 or 500 times also doesn't feel good, and that's kind of where I was until I upgraded away from this spear. I think a really good way to kind of exemplify the concern or the frustration is something that I saw a nerf that popped up like before the patch actually came out and actually had me very scared. So this is Infused Weapon. My initial plan with the character had been to take Infused Weapon as my first ascendancy point, and once I got in and started seeing how you generate frenzy charges and that there's basically only one way with this weapon setup, I noped out of that. But even before that, I saw that the attack damage on this is 125% at level 14. I think when I first ascended at level 22 or 23 or something, it was like 81% of attack damage. And if I just pull up here from the Dawn of the Hunt press kit, here we go. Here's what it was in the press kit, right? So this is from less than 2 weeks ago. 612% attack damage is what it was. And now it scales up to like maybe like 150% or something. So they nerfed this by 75%. I think what happened, and I am guessing for what it's worth, I am guessing, but I think what happened was there was a lot of concern about in-game bosses being like killed in 4 seconds by characters that were seeing them for the first time, right? And so I think that a lot of skills that would have been used to accomplish that basically had their damage values tuned down so that those boss fights would take several minutes, without then accounting for the fact that now fights against white monsters at low levels are also going to take several minutes. And that is exactly what I've run into in the back half of the campaign. I really do feel like I am destroying bosses. I am really cranking through bosses very, very quickly with this build. However, the fights against white monsters, big packs of white monsters, are actually taking a really long time. It is a complete inversion of what I felt like was going on in the first half of the campaign, where I did feel like I was clearing through trash pretty easily. Herald of Blood is quite nice, but then bosses would take like just, I would have basically turned him into a pincushion, like 10,000 stabs with a spear to kill Jamin Ra. It completely flipped around the other direction in the back half of the campaign, killed Jamin Ra my first attempt in like 30 seconds or something, but then killing the white mobs on the way to Jamin Ra, arguably harder than the time I had killing him. Alright, so now I want to talk about the character that I'm playing. I am obviously playing a Huntress. I did go Amazon, just to show off that. Ascendance here, I went with Critical Strike as my first points and Predatory Instinct as my second. Maybe that was a mistake, right? Maybe I should have done it the other way around, and then I wouldn't have had so much trouble fighting bosses and like rare monsters throughout Acts 2 and most of Act 3, but I went with Critical Strike. It really is adding a ton of crit. And then this is what my tree looks like, right? These top 2 branches here. I did stop and take some points and splinters along the way, and this build is actually generating a ton of stun buildup, and it's shredding armor off of any like bosses that we mark. So this is actually not as bad of a note as I thought it was, but it's just not that great to take. Taking Cooked, this has really good synergy with the massive amount of crit that you get out of Critical Strike. The only defensive points I'm taking in the entire tree are right here, Escape Velocity and Enhanced Reflexes. I am also taking Proficiency just to help with Dexterity. I came right through here. I took Maiming Strike. I didn't take Cooked initially because, I didn't have Crit Strike yet. I didn't have a bunch of synergistic points. I came up here and took like this wheel up here before I came back down and took Cooked. I did take Splinters. I do think that these points here are pretty good to take early on. Like just for more damage in the campaign. And then I came down, took Maiming Strike, took Acceleration, took the whole Spear, which one interesting point here is I really don't like that there is no Ascendancy or notable here at the tip of the spear. It really bums me out. But with that being said, the way that you use spears, especially as an Amazon, this tip point is worth a lot more than the 3% attack speed that you would get on one of these small ones, so you do still take it, but like, come on, man, tip of the spear, that's not a notable? Seems like a mistake to me. And then, came and took Versatile Arms, taking Perfectly Placed Knife, because we are bleeding everything, so more crit chance is good. And then I was making my way toward Pinpoint Shot, because the read on that means that it might not actually be that great, but, I'd like to see how good it is, and play around with that. And then, if that wound up not being good, I might take Giant Slayer or just come and, take Tainted Strike. There were a couple of other things. I think Bleeding Out seems like an interesting, notable to make your way toward. And so now just to kind of hit on the skills I'm using Parry because I am using a Buckler, and a lot of people were very down on the idea of using Parry. I certainly was, right? The idea of actually parrying in combat seemed like really ridiculous. But if you parry an enemy, it makes them take 50% more attack damage. That's a pretty crazy amount of damage. And I think that is why the damage on the Huntress and the spears is so poor. I think it is basically, I think it was balanced at some point, and then the parry debuff, if the parry debuff didn't exist, no one would ever use parry, right? It's not something that people want to use. So adding a 50% more damage bonus onto it, that's pretty huge. That'll justify taking it, but now all the rest of everything else has to be scaled down or else it's overpowered. Yikes. And I think that's basically how we wound up here. All right, I got into editing and I realized I just wanted to say, I actually really like parrying in like Sekiro and Soulsborne games. Here's my Soulsborne credentials, right? I have every achievement in Elden Ring. I have, I have my Soulsborne challenge coin. I love Sekiro. I love parrying. I was also without internet for part of tonight, and one of the things I did that time was I just like logged in and killed Uber Genichiro a couple times. So I like parrying. I actually like it a lot more than I thought I would in PoE 2, as something that you basically like leap into melee range and then very quickly hit parry as a way to like add in damage on enemies and then like flip out of melee range back and forth as something that you use very proactively, kind of similar to roll. I actually keybound it right next to roll. With that being said, totally understand why most people wouldn't want to use it. I certainly didn't want to use it when I first saw it. I thought it looked dumb. It has exceeded my expectations, but my expectations were very low. I do like the damage bonus, though. So I'm using Unbreakable on parry just to like make it so that I don't get stunned. I've only gotten stunned while parrying like 2 or 3 times in the campaign once I started using Unbreakable, so this was really good. And then I used Rage Support because I just didn't know what else I wanted to put in there. A bit of free rage here and there. So I'm still using Spear Stab, and the reason for this is there's this very irritating bug where bleeds are supposed to just like wreck Energy Shield, but instead they just don't apply. And that's like really helpful for players, but really, really nasty if you're fighting Energy Shield monsters as a bleed build, which we are. And so you have to be able to stab them out. So concentrated effect on your auto attack is pretty much always good if it has an AoE tag, and this does. So that's really helpful early on in the campaign. And then close combat, martial tempo. swap those around. I put martial tempo and close combat on here. You know, the thing with martial tempo, if you're using it on a skill that costs mana, that's going to ramp up the mana expenditure per second, but using it on a free skill, you know, it is what it is. I will say, of all of the things in PoE, all the things that people would complain about, be frustrated about, the lack of gear dropping, the lack of a crafting bench, all of that. The thing that frustrates me the most, or I dislike the most, is the existence of basic attacks being like an intended good way to play the game outside of the very first zone of the game. I don't want to be auto-attacking in an action RPG. I think it is a huge mistake on GGG's part. It is the thing I would change about the game over literally everything else, even stuff that is, I mean, definitely more of an issue. Spear Throw, I'm not using these skills at all. I just put Momentum and Hemocrystals in here because I was playing around with them, and it's just like a holding spot, right? So Rake is our main skill. Rake really doesn't do a lot of damage. I mean, clearly, you know, but the point of it is that it is a guaranteed bleed, and it makes you move, and it makes you do more damage with the skill based on the the distance that you travel, and you can use it to just like jump back and forth between enemies a lot. I'm gonna go to my hideout and kind of show the playstyle that I am using in a lot of situations. I'll obviously put some footage in here as well. But the way that I'm basically using this is, you know, I'm leaping around to enemies with Rake pretty frequently, and one kind of irritating thing about this is I feel like you have to use always attack. You have to leave that always attack without moving unchecked, which is pretty frustrating. But otherwise you don't really get great movement, and the same goes with the like attacking with spears, chasing bosses. Spear stab, I've left attack and move on, which I really don't care for, but I tried playing without them and it did feel worse. So a lot of the combat is raking and then disengaging back, and then raking and disengaging back, and raking like back and forth to get that extra damage out of the extra travel. So Stomping Ground, super valuable. I think this is a pretty well-known tech at this point, but it makes it so that you, when you move with the rake, you leave a shockwave. You can see it. You can see it triggering underneath me. If I take it out, no shockwave. And so the shockwave does damage based on your strength. And that's really where we're getting the majority of our damage, right? We are pretty much trying to stack strength. And that's why I think spears as they currently exist as a primarily as like a bleed thing, really make a lot more sense as a warrior. You could play like a Smith of Kitava, basically have free capped all res and then 20% increased strength out of your ascendancy. And then kind of not really a lot else, unfortunately, but like that's fine. You're also set up in I think a better part of the tree. You're over here, and you can just like come out through, you know, like all of this melee area, heavy stun build up, and then come down here and take brute strength and give yourself a bunch of increased damage based on your strength, and then just stack strength a lot. Now, later on, you'll be able to get deep cuts. I think this is a level 3 support gem, and that just gives you a lot more bleeding from that. You do also want to use Lacerate. Lacerate will give the Stomping Ground a chance to bleed. I tried playing around with this without using Lacerate, putting like martial tempo or close combat in there, and it was okay. What I had done is I put like Lacerate on Spear Stab, so I could be like regular Spear Stabbing and building up bleed this way, or raking and also building up bleed that way. Ultimately, I found that I got better DPS through like clearing packs of enemies by having Stomping Ground and Lacerate together, and then deep cuts once I was able to fit that in. Blood Hunt is kind of your finisher. You will build up a bleed on enemies with Rake for a while, and you know, flipping back and forth, and then at the like, I'm using oh, actually no, I think I might have taken Execute off. Yeah, I put Execute onto Herald of Blood, so I was using Execute on Blood Hunt for a while. I mean, to use it as basically an execute skill, but then I got heavy swing in here, and ultimately, yeah, I think I was just basically trying to line this up whenever, if I could pull up here in the Ascendancy here, whenever I get like one of these nice open weaknesses where I take, or enemies take like 50% more damage from me, I'll try and throw Blood Hunt in right at the end and make it do like a bunch more damage. And the Blood Hunt, what it does is when you bleed enemies, they kind of get this like special appearance in their health bar, makes them like basically shows off how much damage they've lost to bleed, right? And so there are a lot of other effects. I think it's called Blood Loss. A lot of effects like Blood Hunt and Herald of Blood that can interact with that and either like consume it to deal a bunch of damage in AoE or to like turn it into an AoE pop basically. And so that's what we're trying to do with Blood Hunt. And then, you know, Heavy Swing and Brutality and Bloodlust, all of these just make it do a lot more damage. Kind of a big finisher on bosses. For Disengage, I'm using a combo of Outmaneuver and Ingenuity. Ingenuity is a level 2 support, but like once you're able to get it, you're able to potentially, based on your attack speed, like just alternate between Disengage and Rake, or maybe like Disengage and then 2 Rakes, or Disengage, Rake, Spear Stab, Disengage, Rake, Spear, you know, there's like a lot of potential combos there. Bloodhound's Mark, I think, is the reason that this all really works in single target. When you put this on a boss, if they have blood loss on them, then this basically just has infinite duration, and it makes them take massive increased heavy stun buildup. Like I was absolutely stunning the hell out of bosses with this, and then also because of the single out support gem, which is a level 2 support gem. Huge upgrade. It makes it so that you're basically just able to fully armor break the enemy, and because bleed is based off of the actual damage of the hit, armor breaking is huge. So really easy to armor break enemies, and then, you know, you do some hobble on them as well, basically take all of their evasion away, which means that your accuracy is going to be higher, which means that your crit chance is going to be higher. So you're getting two, you know, kind of two different valuable pieces out of Bloodhound's Mark, in addition to the stun buildup. Then I was playing around with Spira Solaris. It seems worthless to me. I played around with Tame Beast. I know that there are some good tameable beasts out there. I tried to tame a few of them, and I just wound up killing them all, basically. I did tame some very useless beasts, which were, like, funny. Let's see. Where did I put them? All right, yeah, I have a couple of them that are very slow. Let's see here. I'll just turn off my caltrops here and turn on my sapling if I can. Maybe I can't do it in my hideout. Oh, there we go. I just didn't have enough spirit. All right, so I have a sapling here, and like when I move, it will reappear planted in the ground. This is great, right? It actually requires nearby enemies to activate it, and it's pretty worthless. I can press my command minion button to make it move and replant. Yeah, very slow. And then the other one that I have that's also even slower, I think, is the Scarecrow Beast. You know, I tamed a really, like, very deliberately useless guy here. So at least I had some fun with that. I think that's about, you know, the extent of the positives I could say on my experience with taming beasts. So I did play around with a lot of different skills. Wind Serpent's Fury would crash me every single time I tried to use it. It seemed like a cool looking skill in the video, but I was never able to use it. You know, a lot of other skills seemed interesting. I know that people were making use of Whirling Slash and Twister, and I really liked that early on in the campaign, but it was a lot of like comboing. And I think there was a bug with it that was patched recently that was making it just do like orders of magnitude more damage than it was supposed to. So obviously that's not great. I did play around with Lightning Spear early on in the campaign. Ultimately, it's just a very slow attack, and I just really wasn't very happy with it. I think if you're generating frenzy charges for it to like be fully powerful, cool, but given that you only have the one method of generating frenzy charges with parrying and disengaging, like having to do both of those instead of just getting them off of a parry, it just didn't feel very good, so I just didn't really like it, and that's ultimately why I went with the bleed build. So with my third support gem, I got Trail of Caltrops. This just makes it so you drop some like slowing caltrops when you roll. Not a huge deal. I did put magnified effect on it. I don't know why. There we go. I meant to have that on Wind Dancer. I took Wind Dancer with my second aura, and then I did Herald of Blood as my first. Herald of Blood's great, right? Anytime you kill an enemy that's got blood loss on it, it will explode, doing damage based off of like a flat value and also a percentage of their blood loss. This is great, right? I really like this a lot. It was really good throughout the campaign. It really helped with clearing very effectively. And then Wind Dancer, I could actually feel that they had buffed up the damage on Wind Dancer. It does seem like it hits harder, and it also does give a lot less evasion rating than it did before. So, you know, that's not great, but it is what it is. I did lean into it doing more damage, so That's kind of it. In terms of the gear, I had horrible gear throughout the whole campaign. I had gear that I had gotten on the whatever the equivalent of Twilight Strand is in this game that I was still wearing when I killed Jamin Ra. My boots were like stuff that I got from the Miller. So I do have these bushwhacks. I replaced these old boots from, I think it was like Act 3 with these bushwhacks. I got them from a Rogue Exile. That was neat. I played around with some Rogue Exiles before and after they were nerfed, and before they were nerfed, brutal, horrible. I think it's a real dick move to make them use their life flask and be able to do that. I really did not appreciate that they could do that at all. But then killing some of them in the back half of the campaign, like Act 5 and 6 after the nerfs, I mean, they might as well have been made of paper. They felt like they just died instantaneously, which was kind of cool. I would say the biggest thing with the build and like making it actually work is just trying to get as much physical damage as you can on your weapon and like on your rings and stuff. If you can get any physical damage, any strength at all, that really, really helps juice the damage of the build. Ultimately, you know, I've done a little bit of mapping. It was very sweaty, and I mean that literally. Like, I literally was sweating trying to map. It was so much effort just trying to like dance and dodge and move around between packs of enemies to kill like white monsters. And then again, the rares would just flop over unless they were a rare that resummons white monsters. It really didn't make a lot of sense. It was very weird. Ultimately, I feel kind of disappointed by this character. It was my goal to play an Amazon right off the bat and play with spears and get the whole experience, and I have done that, and I have never rerolled on day 2 of a league, and I think that's going to happen. I think I am going to reroll to a crossbow, Deadeye. The only other thing that really appealed to me on that level would just be playing like anything Smith of Kitava to be able to just easily cap resistances. I know it is such a horrible mistake to reroll this early on in a league, but I think I'm going to do it. I think I'm going to go something ranged, and as much as it would make sense to do that as an Amazon, because Amazon is pretty awesome, this Ascendancy really is quite good. I think I just kind of want a fresh start. Another run through the campaign sounds like a bad idea, but I'm going to give it a try as a crossbow Deadeye, and yeah, I think that's what I'm going to do. So ultimately, I wouldn't really recommend this character, but if you want to make it work, I'm confident that you can. There's no way your gear can be as bad as mine, and I did make it through the campaign with horrible gear, so, you know. All right, that's it. That was my experience with the Huntress. Not a great start, and then actually a pretty good finish. You know, I definitely will check back on Huntress over time. I do want to play around with this Ascendancy more. I really do think there are great ideas here, and I think Spears have great ideas in them as well. I think the damage numbers just aren't there right now. All right, that's it. Be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video and you want to see more like it, and if you want to support us even further, consider becoming a channel member. Thanks for watching, and try to have fun in Dawn of the Hunt League. Bye.